Greetings, Bob Fowler here, introducing session number 2 of the class that I'm calling John, Gospel of Radical Difference. In the beginning was the Logos. That's a Greek word. It means word, and it's usually translated that way into English translations. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him, not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overtake it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood, or of the will of the flesh, or of the will of man, but of God. And the Logos became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. John testified to him and cried out, "This was he of whom I said, 'He who comes after me ranks ahead of me because he was before me.' From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. The law indeed was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is the only Son, himself God, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known." All right, let me back up and unpack this a bit. In the beginning was the Logos, the Word, and the Word was with God, the Word was God. Right off the bat, I can't help but think of difference in the Gospel of John. Difference not just between John and the other Gospels, but difference within the fourth Gospel. I don't know about you, but this sets me off. This opening verse breaks my brain a bit. The Word was with God. The Word was God. In my world of experience, for A to be with B and B to be with A, they need to be in relationship. There needs to be a connection, an association between them. But I tend to assume that for A to be with B and B to be with A, they're not the same thing. They are two different things, two different entities. For It's possible, I suppose, for A to be B and B to be A, but in that case, they're not two things, they're one thing. So, but the opening verse of the Gospel of John says the Word was with God, A to B, and the Word was God, A equals B, the same thing. Ah, and he was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him. We're talking about creation here. Creation, creation, creation. Without him, not one thing came into being. And what came into being through him was life and light. And the light shone in the darkness. The first of the poetic, beautiful images of light and life and darkness that the Gospel of John uses, those and many other poetic phrases. I need to explain logos. I put it back in the original Greek because the word is very, very significant. Logos was a very big notion to the Stoic philosophers. For them, logos was divine cosmic reason, rationality. Since we get our English word logic from this word, we could throw that in as well. So, logic, reason, rationality. The Stoics understood that to be present throughout all that is, throughout the cosmos. And it was the energy, the impetus for the creation of all that is. So what we have here is the Christian writer whom we call John. We don't know for sure his name. The book is really anonymous in authorship. But the author is claiming that this logic, this reason, cosmic reason, cosmic rationality was the driving force of creation, and it permeates all that is and has ever since. So right off the bat, we are doing some heavy lifting, lifting a precious word out of Greek philosophy and applying it to Jesus. And by the way, um, the name Jesus doesn't occur until until almost the very end. So, but we kind of had an idea that it was talking about Jesus all along, didn't we? Okay. Why the two stretches of words in red? There appear to be two parenthetical comments inserted into the midst of this passage. Scholars have long thought that maybe there was a pre-existing hymn to divine logos, a hymn to the divine word that the author of this gospel may have latched onto and exploited in writing his own story. Now, this material here doesn't exactly come up later in the flow of the gospel, but it's potent and powerful here up front as the entree, as the overture to the whole symphony. Um, but if this is a hymn toward divine, in praise of divine logos, then there are a couple of interruptions here where we break off from talking about the logos and the incarnation of the logos in Jesus Christ. Twice there's a pause for a parenthetical comment about John the Baptist. Please don't confuse your Johns. There is John, the supposed author of the gospel, that we don't know for sure because the gospel is really anonymous. But then there's John the Baptist, and this is the person we're talking about here is John the Baptist. So twice there's a pause in the midst of what's otherwise a beautiful bit of poetry to talk about John the Baptist. And he is not the light, but he came to bear witness to the light. Um, Down here, the parentheses, the curled parenthetical marks, that's from the translators. The translators were exercising their best judgment that verse 15 is in fact a parenthetical comment, so they enclosed it within parentheses. Up here, they weren't so sure, but those square brackets indicate Fowler's strong suspicion that that too is a parenthetical comment. So that's my use of square brackets. The curly brackets down here come from the translators of the NRSVUE translation, which is what I'm using in this class. For that, on the NRSVUE, you can see my other class, which also has recordings available for it, available online, available on the Trinity website and on YouTube. So, um, wonderful, wonderful poetry here. Wonderful, wonderful poetry. I can't help, but I've already mentioned one puzzling exercise in difference. The word was with God, the word was God. I can't help but perceive another challenge down here. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world as if he weren't already there. But he was already there. He was in the world came into being through him, and yet the world did not know him, did not recognize him, did not give him honor and respect. Of course, chapter 1, verse 14 is the all-time great famous passage on the incarnation. The incarnation, the divine logos, the divine word became flesh, became human, and lived a human life. And that is the all-time classic biblical passage on that idea. No one has ever seen God. It is the only Son, himself God, who is close to the Father's heart, who has made him known. I can't help myself. I perceive attention or artistic conflict, an artful conflict between that and up here, where it says anyone who pays attention to the Logos, which has come into the world as light, although he was really already there since all that is was made through him. But we're talking about sonship or daughtership, being children of God. Is Jesus really the only Son of God? Really? 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 Sounds like to me up here that the option is made available to anyone who was willing to embrace the light. Yes, I know. We were not all present at creation. Well, we were not the instrumentality through which creation happened. Yeah, I get that. But this child of God thing, this son of God thing, really puzzles me. It provokes me. I ponder it. I did another class at Trinity, recordings for which are available online. And I did another class on the Lord's Prayer. And there I recall talking about Jesus inviting his friends, his listeners, to join him in calling God Abba, Father. So in the Lord's Prayer, it seems to me that Jesus is offering the invitation to being a child of God to anyone who will pick up the offer and run with it. So again, another example within our gospel texts about how this sonship of God, of being the Son of God, may not be exclusively reserved for Jesus. I know the Nicene Creed, which I say every Sunday, says he's the only Son. But what do the Gospels say? The Lord's Prayer makes me think. This passage here makes me think. So I invite you to join me in thinking and pondering and puzzling over this stuff. We've just looked at the way the Gospel of John begins. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, all things were made through the Word. How do other New Testament texts begin, or where do they launch? From where do they launch? Paul says in Romans 1:4 that Jesus was declared to be Son of God in and through his resurrection. Really? Really, Paul? The resurrection is when and where we can perceive that Jesus is the Son of God? That's what he says in that verse. Mark implies that Jesus was declared to be Son of God by adoption in his baptism, which echoes Psalm chapter 2, verse 7, which was from the ceremony of the anointing of ancient kings of Israel all of whom were embraced by God as the adopted Son of God. So says God in Psalm 2. Today I have begotten you. Today you are my son, God says to the newly anointed Israelite king. Isn't that an interesting understanding of Son of God? How about Matthew and Luke? They push things back further, further, further. Matthew and Luke suggest that Jesus is discernible as Son of God or Messiah because of his illustrious genealogy or his virgin conception and birth. So, virgin conception, genealogy, being embraced as Son of God in baptism, being embraced as God, Son of God in resurrection. Take your pick. But John's gospel has no baptism. It has no virginal conception. It has no remarkable genealogy. Rather, the word wisdom of God, I'll explain that quickly. The word wisdom of God was with God from the very beginning, and this word wisdom became incarnate in Jesus of Nazareth. No delivery system for the appearance of the word wisdom of God is described in John's gospel. And yet, as biblical scholar Robert Kaiser has said, in John, Jesus is the functional equivalent of God. But let me now leap to the Hebrew Bible. And the operative word in the Hebrew Bible is chokhmah, chokhmah, which is the Hebrew word for wisdom. So Proverbs chapter 8 talks about divine wisdom, the wisdom of God. And you will see that this wisdom of God is talked about using feminine language. Chokhmah in Hebrew is a feminine noun. Logos in Greek is a masculine noun. So if you need gender in your language, often the clue that people follow, often the lead that people follow is whatever kind of grammatical gender is associated with words. So this is wisdom. Some call her Lady Wisdom. Some call her the Wisdom Woman. You could call her Divine Wisdom. Chokhmah. When we get to wisdom, Chokhmah, being involved in creation here in Proverbs 8, just like Logos, thank you to the Stoics, is involved in creation at the beginning of the Gospel of John. Does not wisdom call and understanding raise her voice? On the heights beside the way at the crossroads, she takes her stand beside the gates in front of the town. At the entrance of the portals, she cries out, Oh, to you, O people, I call, and my cry is to all who live. O simple ones, learn prudence, acquire intelligence, you who lack it. So, Lady Wisdom, divine wisdom, the wisdom woman is constantly offering what her wisdom, her insight, her understanding of things to anyone who will listen. The question is, will we listen? Will we pay attention? Will we hear what she has to say? Wise people, um, particularly rulers, you want your rulers, your leading authorities, to be full of wisdom and to rule justly. By me, rulers rule and nobles, all who govern rightly. I love those who love me, and those who seek me diligently find me. Riches and honor are with me, enduring wealth and prosperity. My fruit is better than gold, even fine gold, and my yield better than choice silver. I walk in the ways of righteousness, along the paths of justice, endowing with wealth those who love me and filling their treasures. And I would invite you to perceive some echoes between this and John chapter 1. The Lord created me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of long ago. So God gives birth to, creates wisdom, and that's how the ball gets rolling. That's how reality gets started. Ages ago, I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no springs abounding with water. Before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills, I was brought forth. When he had not yet made earth and fields or the world's first bits of soil. When he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep, when he made firm the skies above, when he established the fountains of the deep, when he assigned to the sea its limit so that the waters might not transgress his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him like a master worker, God's companion in creation, God's divine assistant. I was daily his delight, playing before him always, playing in his inhabited world and delighting in the human race. Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars. She has slaughtered her animals for the feast. She has mixed her wine for the feast. She has also set her table. She has sent out her female servants. Note the feminine here. She calls from the highest places in the town, you who are simple, turn in here. To those without sense, she says, come, eat of my bread and drink of the wine I have mixed. Lay aside immaturity and live and walk in the way of insight. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful stuff. Logos in Greek is a masculine noun. And since Jesus was a biological male, it kind of makes sense that early Christians would reach for nouns that are masculine in gender. This is grammatical gender, not biological sexuality. But it kind of makes sense to, if you're talking about a male human, to reach for a masculine noun. Chokhmah in Proverbs 8, Chokhmah is in Hebrew a feminine noun. And it would have been very, very nervy of the early Christians to reach for a feminine noun. Actually, Chokhmah in Hebrew is the feminine word that we translate as wisdom. The Greek equivalent for wisdom is Sophia. Sophia is the Greek word for wisdom that's also feminine in gender. So it would have been very nervy of early Christians, and some did, by the way, to reach for these feminine nouns, whether in Hebrew or in Greek, to talk about Jesus, a biological male. I can't help but wonder, some of them did this, but what if many had used feminine language to talk about Jesus? Would that make Jesus trans? I leave that thought with you to ponder on. In all of this, whether we're talking Hebrew or Greek or whatever, we're talking about not literal, factual language. We're talking about poetry. We're talking about metaphor, talking about symbolism. So let's not break our brains trying to turn things into literal fact, because that's not what matters. That's not what the Bible's about, literal fact. It's interested in meaning, value, purpose, how to live a deep, rich, full life. Next week, on to Nicodemus. you must be born anothen. And if you don't know what that means, you're ready to go, because Nicodemus didn't know what it meant either. That's next week. So grace and peace.